Welcome to the Gamute Performance Podcast, Episode 9. On this episode of the podcast, I get to talk to Coach Adam Feit. Coach Feit has been a part of Precision Nutrition, Reach Your Potential Training, and now he is currently working on his doctorate. Coach Feit has done so much more than I could ever cover in this short introduction, so without further ado, here is Coach Adam Feit. Coach Feit, thanks for being on with us today. For those of the listeners that aren't quite sure who you are, will you briefly explain a little bit about your background and what got you into the profession?
Oh, well, it's obviously great to be here, Juan. I appreciate you having me on, but briefly is going to be pretty tough.
Oh, take your time, then. Take your time.
I'll try to do my best here.
Yeah.
I think, starting from way back when I was a student athlete, like many of us as strength coaches, and really tried to compete in as many different sports as possible. So, I took that into high school, and that's where I really, took an interest more into the training aspect. Messed around a little bit in middle school, but obviously when you get to high school, you're trying to compete with, the varsity team and whatnot. So It was during that time I got to get together with some great mentors that, I still touch base to this day, that are strength coaches in the field, guys like Donnell Boucher and Matt Slaheka. So they kind of took me in, and that really paved the way for where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And unfortunately, as some strength coaches, they get in this field because they get hurt and they kind of learn about it. And that's exactly what happened to me. So going into my senior year in high school, broke my arm, clean in half right before our first football game.
Yeah.
And right from there, I got to talk with our athletic trainer, and he's like, "Man, you're going to be a great strength coach one day. There's a career for that." And I had no idea, right?
Yeah.
So do a little bit more research and found out Springfield College, by far, I think, obviously biased, the best school for strength conditioning in the nation. And turned out it was like 20 minutes down the road. So that's where it took me. So I went there, had the opportunity to play football there, had a great career, and that's really where it shaped the path in terms of internships and meeting people. So, kind of a flyby, what happened and where I went. It was, I think, my junior year. That's when I started my internship. So drove down to University of Connecticut, worked with all sports down there with the late and great Jerry Martin, Amanda Kimball, Mo Butler, Matt Herhall, all great coaches that I still stay in touch with today. And that set me up with a internship at the U.S. Olympic Training Center, because we had to do a huge, 500-hour workload to qualify as our senior project. So that was awesome, because I'm out there, I'm preparing for my last year of college football. I'm training with literally the world's best, and it was a great opportunity. Got to meet some great people and some connectors that would eventually help me get future jobs. So that was awesome. Came back in the fall of 2006 and finished up my last year of football, and then took an unpaid internship with Arizona State. So I kind of got done with school in about 3.5 years. I knew I wanted to be a GA coach, but unfortunately, GAs aren't starting until May or June. So I had a couple months just kind of kicking around. And so stayed out there. I volunteered, just for the hell of it, to obviously get more experience and meet more people. So I was out there with Joe Ken and guys like Josh Storms, Ben Hilgert, Ryan Reynolds, all these guys that are heads of their own program or in the NFL, which was a great opportunity. So that was awesome, because that, again, opened up another door. So I went to the Citadel, where I met Frank Wintrick, who's now at UCLA, and Donnell, who had gone down as a GA with me, and rode that train for about 10 months and had an opportunity to work Division I again at the FBS level. So I took an assistant job at University of Louisville with their football team for, I think, maybe $10,000, which was like big bucks when you're making nothing. So my mom still was kind of fired up about it, because I was giving up an education, but I was like, it'll work out, don't worry. So, a couple months working the restricted position, and ended up getting hired on full time as an assistant. So that was awesome. So, unfortunately, at that level, I think, as you know, it's all about the results, not exactly the process. So, we like to say we're the best strength conditioning team. We just exactly weren't the best football team. So, a couple short years there, and then got an opportunity to go to Eastern Michigan. So I was the head strength coach up there for the whole department, had a couple of assistants. 2010, shot up to the Carolina Panthers for a quick year, 2011, and then I spent a good 5 years, great 5 years of my career, probably the best 5 years I've ever had in coaching, co-running a facility, Reach Your Potential Training, or RIFT, down in New Jersey, and that was awesome. And the last 2 years of that, I ended up joining Precision Nutrition full-time as a presenter and a member of our athlete and team coaching program, as well as the Level 2 CERT program, and that's where I'm at now. So I'm balancing, precision nutrition, my family, and, going into my second year of my PhD in sport and exercise psychology.
Wow, what a journey. So a lot of strength coaches...
I told you I wasn't going to be brief.
Definitely. So a lot of strength coaches would say you're very successful, right? Myself included. So can you define a little bit about what success means to you and how that drives you?
Yeah, that's a great question, Juan. I think we overthink that. You know, if we're in a position of leadership or influence or, you know, even myself as a parent right now, I think the easiest thing we can define success as is a thank you.
Okay.
You know, when we look down at, you know, what did you do? How did this benefit me as a coach? Where am I trying to bring this person? Because I think, you know, it's basic general definition of coaching. It's helping somebody go from, you know, one point to another.
Okay.
And the easiest way I can define that is like, well, did it work? Well, was there a thank you? You know, doesn't have to be a handwritten card, but, you know, where did I take them on their journey? Where did I help them? So, you know, I used to go by the whole adage of like John Wooden and, you know, having the self-satisfaction of knowing you did everything you can to achieve a result. But, you know, at the end of the day, if I was successful in being a great partner to my wife, you know, it's going to come down with, hey, I appreciate you doing X, or, you know, it really means a lot that you did Y. Or as a dad, success is, you know, hey, Dad, I really want to thank you for, you know, bringing me to the bus stop today because it's his last day of kindergarten. So in the terms of athletes and coaches, you know, what can I help them with and how can I get them from A to B? But mostly, like, are they reflecting back on that process? So I don't know, maybe it's too simple, but I've gone through it. I read all the books, and for me, it just comes down to where is that reflection on their behalf that's like, wow, I appreciate that, Coach. Thanks.
Okay. So you would say it's a little bit less about wins and losses and more about that interpersonal connection then?
100%. I think that's where, you know, a lot of great people are finally pushing this forward. You know, guys like Brett Bartholomew has been a huge influence on kind of a lot of what I'm trying to do now with my PhD and just what we're trying to do in the field now. Yeah. And I think that was the big piece that I was missing, you know, in the NFL was, you know, it's very transactional when you get to those levels. And, you know, hey, at that level is great for the things that you want to get out of it. You know, if you want to make $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year as a head strength conditioning coach with football, that's awesome. Yeah. But that's also going to come with the threat and to your family, to your stability, and to the fact that you're probably going to be wearing a different logo, you know, polo in the next couple of years, which is fine. And if that's what you're chasing, great. I chased that for the first half of my career. And a lot of us as coaches, we get older, we realize like, hey, you know, would I change anything? Absolutely not. But for me and for really most of my career, I realized success had nothing to do with what was scoreboard. Now, I'm all about, like, there are no moral victories, right? When you're an athlete, when you're a coach, did you win or did you lose? 100% I get that. But as you get around in the field a little bit longer and you start looking at things from a different angle, I think you learn to appreciate all of the other things and, you know, and the entire process versus the product at the end.
Okay. No, I like that. And that's, I mean, I agree with you 100% as well. And those coaches that are focused on that connection, you know, often are the ones that have the most influence as well. So that's big. So moving on. So what does entrepreneur mean to you? I would consider you one, but what does that word necessarily mean to you? And is that important for strength and conditioning coaches to have?
Absolutely. I think, you know, Coach Ron McKeefer did a great job with his book, you know, CEO Strength Coach. And, you know, I remember meeting with him and spending some time with him when he was writing that book, when he was still coaching on Eastern. And, you know, a lot of it stems from the fact of, you know, there's a great book out there called The E-Myth Revisited by, I think, Michael Gerber. But, you know, it talks about, you know, you're really wearing three different hats or you're accomplishing three roles. You've got your technician, you've got your manager, and you've got your entrepreneur. And we as coaches, you know, we're very good technicians. You know, we strive to great at X's and O's and intensity charts and velocity-based tracking and GPS. But all of a sudden you get propelled into a leadership position. So now it comes in the managing part, right? So who's preparing us to be great leaders and managers? And then, you know, some of us go into the private sector. Some of us, you know, want to take our skill sets elsewhere. And then this entrepreneur mindset is kind of lost, and there's really nothing we can do with it. So, you know, I think if you look at the basic definition of an entrepreneur, I think it's, you know, something about it's a person who, you know, pretty much organizes and operates a business or an organization, and they take on greater than normal risk to do that. Okay. And I think that's all of us as coaches, right? So what do? We try out new exercises. We go to new conferences. We extend our hand out to hopefully make connections with people that are outside of our coaching circle. So the more we can tend to that aspect of our development, that's only going to be another opportunity down the road. So the more we can spend time in that entrepreneur mindset, the better, because, you know, I've said it, many coaches before me have said it, but how many coaches in this field, as much as we love it, but they really retire as a strength coach at a high level school wearing a whistle around their neck. It's very uncommon. Definitely. So it's not to, tell coaches it's not worth it, but you've also got to look at things from multiple angles, and you just can't be so narrow-minded.
No, I agree. That's a really good answer. So who are your biggest influences for you to take the path that you're currently on?
Well, I got to give props to the home team. I mean, my wife is, first and foremost, what we're doing now especially is a huge reason of, why we're talking today, because I really shifted focus in my career as a strength coach and then, business owner and, working online. But, moving back to where I grew up, because my wife had an opportunity to go back and get her PhD, really cost-free to accept the fellowship. I'd like to say it was the easiest, hardest decision I've ever made because, for so long in coaching, especially, and if you have a support team, you climb the ladder so fast, you're willing to pack your bags and move across country and just do whatever you need to do because that's how the game is played. And, for the first 6 years of our marriage, that's what we did. It was like, hey, where am I going? What kind of job am I taking? And how is this going to benefit the family? And so right now, I mean, she's been the biggest influence because it was this magical time where it's like, hey, she's got this great opportunity to further her education and rediscover her identity as an educator in this field and hopefully be a college professor. So, I got to go, but she's a major influence.
Okay.
If it wasn't for her, a lot of these decisions would be a lot easier. And I'd probably be back in college strength conditioning just, as a college coach and working 18 hours a day because there's nothing else to do and, doing what I had to do. So, she's been a big one. And then I think, a couple others, my position coach when I was in college, Mike Sarasulo at Springfield College, who's now the head coach that I'm spending a lot of time with. And, just instilling that work ethic and mindset in me when, I had thought I was never going to play football again. And just, college is a time of transition, right? I think as coaches, we forget that. There's a lot going on. All of a sudden, you go from rules and curfews to, home-cooked meals to none of that and way more. So, Coach Sarasulo was a big influence on, what it takes to not necessarily just be a man, but be the player, the teammate, and the coach that, I aspired to be. So, a lot of credit goes to him. And then, two guys I spend a lot of time with in my, field work and is obviously, Coach Joe Ken House at Carolina Panthers and then John Berardi with Precision Nutrition because, on the completely other ends of the spectrum in terms of, what they do in their career, they're here to make the industry better. And what I've learned working with Joe over the years at, 3 different locations and now spending a lot of time with John Berardi and his organization. I mean, I'm very fortunate to have a great support team remotely and at conferences and, in my own household. So I really got to give, credit to those people especially.
Yeah. And I mean, that's crazy. That's awesome. So we've talked about a lot of the good things that happened to you, right? So what's some of the darker side, some of the pitfalls that you've endured on this journey?
There's a lot of those, my man.
Okay.
That's another, and it's not just me. I think that's an area that we don't talk about enough, right? We're the first ones to post our championship rings on Instagram or PRs. But who's really showcasing, the dark times. So I appreciate you bringing that up. But, actually, on a personal level, I've never really brought it up, but, I've gone through a couple bouts of depression, early on in my career of just trying to figure out, where I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to be doing because, whether you're working in toxic work environments or you're away from your support system, I think that's a real thing. And, that's something that we have to bring more awareness to because, we tell our coaches, we tell our athletes to man up and just find a way and get it done. And we will. There's 100% we always will, but it's always going to come at a cost. So, I battled that early on and, actually, leaving the NFL with making great money and having a year left on my contract and realizing, I could do more in this world and impact more people. So, taking a salary cut of, more than 50% and really joining up with another coach and his wife to start a business that I literally met online. I had no idea who they were, what they were about, and, going out there and just seeing a business plan and seeing what the space could be. That was a dark time because you go from, I always have a recruiting class or I always have a team to train to, we've got 7 girls and I don't know, I charge them $20 an hour cash and we're going to build a business out of this. And you're kind of, all right, well, I better figure this out. So that came with some dark times. We lived in a studio apartment. My wife and I, and, our son was being born, about 10 months into that. So living in a studio apartment, the 3 of us, and then that growing and running a business during the hurricane. We were down in New Jersey during Hurricane Sandy, so that was challenging. And, really just tying all that in together, just the grind. I hate using that because I think it's an overused term, but really growing something from nothing, taking a business plan and an idea and a logo and a Twitter profile and being like, what are we going to do and how can I take all my experiences working at every level possible and turning that into a sustainable business. And, that's probably one of my more proudest accomplishments of, going in something with 7 kids. And by the time I left, we had trained over 5,000 and had co-op a couple products and spoke internationally. So there's definitely those times in there, those are the potholes that we rush to fill and we rush to kind of cover up. But we're all about talking about the peaks, but nobody was really going to go out there and talk about the dark times. So good question on that one, Juan.
No, I appreciate it. And I appreciate you touching on that as well. Because, depression, that's coming out a lot in professional sports. And I know, as there's a lot of young males in strength and conditioning, right? And the life of a strength coach, it's a fairly isolated one, depending on where you live. A lot of places are college towns, so that connection with the outside world is often limited. So would you touch a little bit on just some of your strategies for how you came through that the most,
Well, I think the biggest thing is obviously having that support system. So whether that's counseling, whether that's, your significant other, but I think in its a more holistic sense, it's having a lot of outlets, right? Yeah. We bash ourselves about how we don't have any hobbies and all we like to do is exercise. Well, I hate to say it, but many of us are going to get to a point where exercise isn't going to give us the same hit as it used to.
Yeah.
And we're gonna milk that as long as we can. It's probably one of the best things for mental clarity. But you're gonna want to spend a couple hours outside of the gym. And I think you brought up a really good point about we work at these schools that are college towns. Well, I don't know how you operate, but I'm not going to the bars with my athletes, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going downtown. Those are some principles and ethics that I hold by, and that's something that really limits you. So then, you're going to go to a restaurant, you're going to go to a chain restaurant, you're going to see people, but what are you going to do? You're going to go out with the other people in the athletic department, but you're spending all your time with them.
Yeah.
And after 12, 14 hours in a weight room, and let's talk about that. I mean, how many of the weight rooms are still in the basement or 3 floors below sea level?
No, I agree.
And so, I mean, the research is very clear, like exercise, daylight, social interaction, having outlets of stress. I mean, these are all things that we talk about to our athletes, but are we practicing what we preach? So, that was a big help. And, I think just accepting where I was and what I wanted to get out of it and really enlisting the help of others. And, my wife was a big rock during that time. And, as we grew up family, it was no problem after that because you really realize your purpose and what's most important in life. But, for the young coaches out there, I mean, it's the same thing. Find hobbies, talk with other people. Brian Mann, who, he's actually going to University of Miami now, but with the zoo for, over 10 years, I think almost 15 years. I mean, I remember him talking about he would spend most of his times at the, the local bar with other professors outside of strength and conditioning. I mean, it was like neuroscience, engineering, and all that. And gave him a lot of ideas for his research that he could do for work. So, finding those outlets and really branching out from just weights and plates, it can do a lot of good things for your health.
No, that's a good answer. And then you touched on it a little bit, right? But so you touched on the bigger picture. So what's the bigger picture for your life,
Ooh, that's deep. Well, let me, in terms of like my purpose, like what I want my eulogy to say, or like what I'm really trying to get out of life. I mean, where do you want to go with?
So let's say more of like, what are you trying to accomplish, right? So obviously strength and conditioning, you can connect with a lot of people, right? But like, I feel like we get stuck in our jobs, our day-to-day a lot. So like, what's like the bigger purpose? Like, what do you want to accomplish through this field, through your life, through the people that you interact with?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I'll maybe scale it back just a little bit in terms of like, why do I coach? Because, whether I'm coaching online with Precision Nutrition, whether I'm presenting to an audience of 500, whether I'm, tilting my head sideways to check squat depth in the weight room, years ago when I first started coaching, it was like, well, I want to make a difference in people's life, right? Like I want to change people for the better. And then, halfway down, maybe 5 or 6 years in, I'm kind of thinking like, you know what, this is a pretty good idea, and, I like it, but I think there's more to it, right? And so, with that being said, I'm like, well, I want to be the coach that maybe I never had, right? We start reflecting back on all these opportunities, these coaches that were maybe transactional or just mother effed us or didn't really give us that time of day. And, now, like, what do I maybe want to be remembered for essentially is, I want to coach as much as I can because I want to get as much life experience as possible because I want to be the best coach for the people that matter most. And for the people that matter most, those are my kids.
Okay.
Because every athlete I get to interact with is going to be a situation that I'm going to deal with my son or daughter. Whether it's athletics, whether it's academics, whether it's peer pressure or self-esteem, I'm going to see that. And they're giving me an outlet to practice that now. So then when I do have to do that, it's going to matter. If I'm working with fitness professionals online, it's going to be about when I'm helping them transition through their life, and if they're having issues with their mental health or their physical health or what to do in their life as they grow a position. So at the end of it, again, it comes with age and, experience, is you really realize, like, what is this all for? Yeah. And when it all comes down to it, it's going to be the people closest in your inner circle.
No, that's a really, really good answer. I think it's the answer a lot of people need to hear as well, because not everyone has a why, and there's that book, Start With Why by Simon Sinek, but not everyone has one. They go through the motions, but they don't necessarily know why. So I think it's important to refocus every once in a while.
Well, and I think a good point there, too, Juan, is the fact that I don't blame them. Like, I remember, I was 21 years old sitting in Joe Ken's office at Louisville, and he was like, why are you coaching? What's your priority in life? I'm like, I'm going to be a head strength conditioning coach. Yeah. And he's, are you kidding me? Like, that's it. That's your life's purpose. Yeah. And I never really thought about it until I had kids as well. But I don't blame the younger coaches, for thinking, well, I want to be a head coach, or I want to write a book, or, I want to speak on the national circuit, because you don't have that experience. You don't have that, you're not looking through the same lens as we are. So for them to hear, well, you got to get out of the weight room and you got to go do things other than that, it's perfectly normal to be like, nah, you guys are just old and burnt out. Like, that's not the situation. But, I don't blame them whatsoever for doing that. I think we just have to accept that, but help them see a little bit longer down the road.
Yeah, no, I like that. So you tested a little bit on your time in the NFL, right? So can you touch on the good and the bad, and what ultimately made you decide to step away from the NFL or not pursue that anymore? And you talked about your family a little bit, but can we just expand on that?
Yeah, so, actually, I remember talking with somebody, and probably a reason why I got into, sports psychology now, but, I was talking with one of our coaches there, and, there was a lot of life changes. So in the matter of a year, I had left Eastern Michigan. I had taken a job in North Carolina. My fiance so she was my fiance at the time before we got married. So I had gotten engaged. I had moved my fiance out of college strength conditioning, because she is a strength coach as well. I had got an apartment. I had driven her out. I had moved into a house. I bought a home, got married, got pregnant, and then started like a big time job. And so that was a lot of life changes, and it happened very quickly. And definitely. I'm not an expert on life management, but I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to do like 7 or 8 major things in less than a year. Yeah. And so that was a big reason, going through it, but also my experience there. It was an interesting year, right? It was a lockout year, so we didn't really get a lot of athlete interaction at all for maybe the first 6 or 7 months. And then it was like wham! It was like slap in the face. It's go time. And looking back, I think my lack of preparation in terms of like, okay, this is the next level. I was young. I was 25 years old. I was, I think at the time, the youngest strength coach in the NFL at that level, and everything is very results-based, and I recently gave a presentation at the University of Connecticut State Clinic, but, what's the final score? Everything that was done in that organization, and really the organization as a whole, is what is happening on Sunday. Because what happens on Sunday dictates who stays on the team, who leaves the team, what coaching strategies will change, what your weight room strategy will look like, how your food will be prepared, everything. And as much of a negative that was for me, it was also a huge positive, because I got to see when you get everybody essentially rowing in the same direction, as Pat Lencioni talks about in 5 Dysfunctions of Team, you can be unstoppable. And so it was a great change up to seeing, okay, if I'm running a business, which ended up helping me when I left to go run Reach Your Potential training, we've got to get everybody on the bus, and we've got to be facing the right direction, and we've got to be talking the same message. And so it was kind of a double-edged sword for me, where it was like everything is about the result, it's about the result, it's about the result, because you're not getting a 4-year developmental plan with an athlete, right? You're not getting that at 18 years old and teaching them life lessons. It's about, you're a grown adult, you have a job to do, whether you're a coach or an athlete, and you've got to do your job. And, that was a big change. So, reflecting back on that, and then, my wife and I getting pregnant and realizing, is this the best place for us right now? And can I have the most impact and influence in my career? Is this what high-level coaching should be about. And that personal question that I had to ask myself. And, I got towards the end of the season and I realized, okay, it's a great opportunity, but it's not the great opportunity for me. And I wanted to get back into college coaching. I had some opportunities, and fortunately or unfortunately, however you look at it, I said yes to Bobby Smith and his wife Sharon at Reach Your Potential Training. And 24 hours earlier than I got a college offer to go back and work with athletes and develop them from the ground up. And I wouldn't change a thing. But for me, it was just the whole aspect of development and seeing things for more than just what was the scoreboard on Sunday.
So let's talk about Reach Your Potential Training a little bit, right? So what's kind of the business aspect that people don't necessarily see on that, and the difficulties of running a business?
Well, you got to make money.
Yeah.
That's the foremost, right? Like
yeah.
I said earlier, you don't get a guaranteed recruiting class, and you have to make sure that your athletes enjoy the training, but they're challenged by it, because you have to cater. You're not selling training to the kids, you're selling training to the parents. And I remember joining it, and it was like, oh man, we're going to be sold out. Like, we got a former NFL coach. This is Cam Newton's strength coach's rookie season. Like, it's going to be off the hook. And all of a sudden, 80% of our clientele were female, and they didn't know who Cam Newton was and what the NFL was. So it really didn't matter. So for that part, the business aspect, it's a skill set. You can teach skills, right? We all have talents. We're born with that. But how can you teach skills? And when I got on, I was like, look, I don't know anything about business. I took one business class in college, but I'm gonna coach my hair off, and we're gonna get great results, because we're gonna care. We're gonna look at the big things, and we're gonna see this as a long-term investment. And that's exactly what we did. So, by I think year 3, we had tripled our revenue from year 1, and then by the time year 5 hit, it was like quintuple what we did. I mean, literally, we were just adding money on top of money, which allowed us to grow our staff, which allowed us to do bigger and better things. But we never lost sight of our core values, and that was essentially, what type of experience can we provide for the kids? So, and I'll get back to your question about what do you have to learn about business is there is a bottom line, and that was a great lesson I learned from the NFL. Is the bottom line was the W, the bottom line was the checkbook. And we had to make sure that training wasn't too cheap, but the value had to be displayed in what we provided as a service, but also what we did with our kids. And it was during my time with Bobby and the rest of the staff there at RIP that I was able to really tie in my college experiences, my NFL experiences, and tie this into this is how things should be run. And, I'm doing some work in college now, and if given the opportunity to ever go back to a leadership position, it would be unconquerable, unstoppable of what I learned in the private sector. And, I think a big part of that is it made coaching fun again, because you wanted to challenge them. We ran a college program. I mean, we ran, the levels. We did a Block Zero program. We did an elite program. We had a football-specific program. We had high-performance programs. We had kids programs, and it allowed me to really, ignite the flame and keep it lit, because that's what was most best about it.
No, that's good. That's good. Okay. So you've both been a speaker and an author. Can you recall on some of the more important speaking or authoring engagements that you've participated in?
Well, I actually had my biggest one at the regional ACSM conference out here in New England. I think there was close to 500 people in one room.
Wow. Okay.
Which was awesome. It was very challenging, because I don't know if you've been in a presentation of mine, but I prefer the method of kind of storytelling and the way I present my slides. And obviously, being on a stage of researchers, I mean, we're talking guys like Stuart Phillips, and we're talking about high-level protein, and, the conference itself was nutrient timing. And so I really had to change and reframe how my message was going to be. So I had to do a little bit more white paper research, and that was humbling, to say the least, because you try and find stories of coaching with, the laboratory of so-and-so et al. Found this, and then you're putting up pipes. But I learned a lot on that. It was a huge stage. I had to hold the microphone, and then, you're always going to run into AV issues, and thankfully my wife was there, and she just ran up on stage and fixed it. So that was probably my biggest one. But, I've had some other great opportunities, too. I was able to present down at Altus, with Dan Paff and McMillan down in Arizona, and that was really great to just, present in front of legends of our field in track and field, So that was cool. And, I spent some time. I do a lot of international work, too, so I've been to China twice. I went to with Brett Bartholomew and Ron McKeefrey over at the Beijing Performance Summit. I've been to Taiwan. Australia was awesome. I did 5 presentations in 3 days there. So Yeah, I thrive in those big pressure environments. That's kind of that whole, what we call in psychology, like social facilitation. We'll audience effect, we'll rise to the occasion. So I love that. So it's like game day for me. Just give me a mic and I'll go to work.
Yeah. And I think you brought up a good point there, right? So you talked about how you had to adjust your language, right, when you were presenting to that group of 500. So how important is language and delivery in not only our profession, but essentially every profession across the board?
It's crucial. And I think where I look at, when I go to presentations and conferences, I don't even pay attention to the content, because you can get the content in the PDF, you can get the content in the book.
Yeah.
Everything I evaluate speakers on is essentially how they deliver their message, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Are they going up there and talking to us, or are they talking at us? And, for a lot of that, I get lost in the transitions. What are their crutch words? What are their tendencies? What is their verbal? What is their nonverbal language? How do they communicate? So I think a lot of what happens is essentially your message is only as clear as your delivery allows it to be. And where I do a ton of time, personally, I record myself as much as I can, visually as with a recorder, so I can go back and see, did I rush through this? Did I get too fired up? Did I do too many hand movements? Where am I going? How many tangents did I go on? And I take that very seriously. And I get pretty fired up when I sit in on a talk that maybe it's a coach or a professor or somebody that's got a bunch of alphabet soup after last name, and it's somebody that we really respect.
Yeah.
And they totally, they ruin it. And they go up there and they either cuss or they just lose the message. And I'm like, or they spend no time on their slides. Like, spend some damn time on the slides. Don't regurgitate what you presented 3 years ago at another conference.
Yeah.
Spend some time, because I want to be connected to you, and I really spend a lot of time. I really take a lot of pride in that. So, those are just a couple of things I look at when seeing that. But you got to be clear, you got to be deliberate, and you got to know your audience. I've seen speakers come in and it's like they're talking to a Fortune 500 company, or they're talking to, exercise science 101 students. You've got to do your research, and you got to understand what your, purpose and passion is.
Okay. And I mean, I think you kind of gave us some advice for young coaches, but what other advice specifically would you have for young coaches that want to get into speaking and authoring, kind of in the similar vein that you are?
Yeah. So, I think we know kind of the whole 10,000 hour rule is kind of debunked. You're not just going to magically come up 10,000 hours of practice and be like, oh, I'm an expert, right? There's so many variables that go into that, but we can't deny one of the fundamental laws of learning. John Wooden talks about that. It's repetition. And for me, starting off, it's speak as often as you can to as many audiences as you can, because you never know. You're not an expert. You're starting off coaching. You may have to talk about nutrition. You may have to talk about recovery. You may have to talk about leadership. You may have to talk about, game day setup or meet with your interns, what have you. So getting those reps in early and often, that's only going to separate you when those opportunities do get up. Because, I did middle school drama, and I never really thought about it. And when I present, people do come up to me and they're like, you own the stage. Like, what's your secret? And I'm like, man, I've been doing this a long time. Like, I was the Tin Man in the middle school play, for crying out loud, right? And so back then, you're just like, oh, yeah, whatever. And now I look at it, like, I was in drama in middle school. I held a captain position in almost every sport I played with in high school and then college. And so I was always getting those reps. And so by the time I got to present, I did my first state clinic in 2008 or 2009. And then it went to regional, and then it went to national, and then it just went to private workshops. So, repetition is important, and you get in as many reps as you can with as many angles and opportunities as you can.
Yeah.
You'll be able to talk anything, and, you'll have a great time doing it.
Yeah. No, that's good advice. So what advice would you give specifically your 20-year-old self?
20 years old. All right, so that's junior year in college. I would say a big piece of this, I've talked about angles or just maybe vantage points and kind of how we look at things, maybe like lenses. And I think, one thing I talk about with the coaches I work with is, what are your 3 S's? Which views are you looking at? You've got your self view, let's say you're playing football and you're looking through your face mask, or lacrosse, what have you. You've got your sideline view, and then you've got your skybox sky view. And I would definitely tell myself, don't spend so much time looking through, the self view, that face mask, because all you see is what's really in front of you.
Yeah.
And your roles are very shut off. I got to do what I got to do, right? I I got to ace this test so I can get that professor's recommendation so I can get that internship, or I got to nail this internship so I can get the next job. I got to do a bang up job here so I can get the next job. And you keep doing that, and then you miss out on so many opportunities, you know, socially and mentally, and just overall developing yourself as a complete person. And so I would challenge myself, you know, to go back in college. And I have that opportunity now, not to challenge myself, but maybe some of the kids I get to work with, and even my kids, about, you know, take a greater approach, keep your head on a swivel, and look at how every opportunity and every experience will teach you something, because it's not just weights and plates. You know, it's not just squats and sprints. So if I can get out of my own head, and hey, how does it look like as the coach on the sideline, right? You know, the get back coach, like what are we looking at, right? And then look at it from a coordinator's point of view in the skybox, right? So you're up, you know, maybe 20, 30, 40 feet, or, you know, higher level than that, you can see the whole picture. And so I'd probably go with that. Like, don't worry about now and what's next right now. Really take a moment and look all around you, because there's so many things happening around you. You don't want to miss that.
Yeah, and that's another good point of you know, kind of the psychological point of being mindful, right, and being present, which I feel like a lot of our society are not today, with our, you know, being buried in our phones and things like that. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, that drives me nuts. I actually, you know, I'm working a lot on boundaries right now. You know, finishing up my first year of school, I actually have to take more of my own advice, especially when it's on the, you know, the table of like deadlines, and you know, got pretty thick towards the end of the semester, and I'm like, I have to say no more. You know, it was, you know, you and I were talking about the book, and I'm like, oh man, I would love to, like, this is it. And, you know, you have to make those hard decisions. But definitely, we've got to do a better job of that, especially as in coaching, because we're not going to make it if we don't. Exactly.
So I would consider you successful. We talked on this a little bit, right? But most successful people have a daily routine. Do you have one? And if so, what does that kind of look like?
I don't. The only thing I make sure of, even though I'm still successful according to you, right? I try and sweat every day. You know, that's something I've really tried to implement. The crazier my life has gotten with kids and going back to school and working full time. So, you know, that could be the infamous hashtag 10-minute walk that's going around on Instagram right now. That could be training in my garage gym. That could be, you know, having some other, you know, coaches over and just, you know, getting after it, you know, in the squat rack, whatever it is. So I definitely try to do that. You know, I do the journaling when I can. You know, I definitely do some reflections. You know, I guess that's one thing I always do with my kids before bed is, you know, what's one thing that they're grateful for and one thing I'm grateful for, because that really anchors me down. So, you know, after a 5-10 minute story, we talk about, you know, what went well that day, what were some of the highs, and, you know, now we're starting to get into some kind of like, what are some of the lows? Like, what are we going to work on next time? But, you know, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I wake up and I make, you know, organically, you know, traded coffee, and I sit on my deck and I listen to the birds and I write in my journal. I think our ability to adapt and overcome the lack of routine, especially as you get older, I think that's what makes you successful. Because if we get so set in our routine and it goes south, what the hell are we going to do now?
Oh, okay. That's really interesting. Okay. Yeah, I haven't quite heard that perspective. So that is actually really cool.
I could be completely wrong. I'm just saying, like, I do my best, you know, like I've got things I do all the time, but I don't wake up and saying, okay, this is my time for 20 minutes. I'm going to go through routine every single day.
Definitely. No, I
have checkpoints I want to get accomplished, but I may have to move those around because my life is crazy, and I want to make sure I get it all in if it's important.
And I think that's the important part, right? Like having those set points, though. So it might not look like like you said, you know, waking up 20 minutes early and doing that thing. But I think it's important to have those set points, like you said, to bring you back and to kind of anchor you. So no matter what happens in the day, you can reset.
Yeah, and I like how you said that with the points, because that's really how I look at it. You know, I every day I try to aim for, you know, let's say, you know, it's uninterrupted time with my son. All right, did I do that? Check. Did I get uninterrupted time with my daughter? Check. Did I get quality time with my wife? Check. Did I sweat through exercise? Check. Did I contribute a little bit towards my own professional development? Check. Did I do a little bit of work for my dissertation and my topic for school? Check. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, I checked a bunch of boxes today. Today was a good, and I think a lot of us, we just kind of forget all that, and we just go, you know, all gas, no brakes in one thing. And it's like, oh man, but I crushed work today. I got like 5 projects done. And it's like, great. But was it a good day because you ignored everything else?
Yeah. No, that's heavy. Hey, that's really good stuff. And moving into this last question, I know you're busy, but what kind of projects are you currently working on? And how can people best reach out to you and follow your journey?
Yeah, so I'm on social media. I don't get on too much. That's kind of one of the things I'm learning to say no to a little bit more, unless it's something cool about my kids or a project I'm working on. So I'm on Instagram at AE Feit, Twitter at Adam_Feit, and then Facebook's probably still my social media platform of choice because, I'm in that post-millennial 30-plus old, Facebook was huge back in college.
Yeah.
So we're just in touch on that. And so I do that. And then in terms of projects, right now I'm, school is a priority with work. And so I'm really doing a lot of work on my review of literature for my dissertation. So I'm hoping to, fill some gaps in terms of sports psych coaching and strength conditioning, because I think that's a huge area that we miss out on. And I think we're doing it wrong. I think we're very open to throwing out a motivational video or a YouTube or ammonia capsule or, slapping the tail before a squat or, piercing ears. But, motivation is something that is exploited and not fully understood. So I'm hoping to, kind of change that and, work with that. And then, I picked up a hobby. I married both blends of, doing something outside the gym and then within the gym. I'm actually on this quest of making as much do-it-yourself garage gym equipment.
Okay.
So that's what I'm posting a lot on my...
Yeah, I saw the slide board. That was cool.
Dude, $43, man.
That's impressive.
But it works pretty good. And so, I made that. I made a partner glued ham that you don't need a partner for, which is, clutch when you're working out by yourself.
Definitely, yeah.
And I've done some other things too. So I'm just kind of messing around. I think next on my list is a K-box and flywheel. So
okay, yeah. I'm going to stay posted for that one.
Yeah, but that's it, man. I'm keeping a pretty low profile. This is a big investment personally and professionally, and hope more years it'll be, Dr. Team Feit. My wife and I will be graduating at the same time, so we're excited.
Awesome. That is super exciting. And Coach, I can't thank you enough for being on today. There's a lot of cool things in here that I think, not necessarily a lot of people talk about, so I think it's a good conversation starter. So once again, thank you so much for your time.
Hey, it was a pleasure, and I appreciate, what you're doing for this platform and as well as, paying it forward to the rest of us, because the more messages we can get from other coaches in the field at every level of their development, the better we will all be, when our time has come. So thanks again for that.
No problem. And hopefully, I'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right. Best of luck. Take care.
Thanks again to Coach Feit for taking the time out of his day to join me in this conversation. I think he covers a lot of things that have really been overlooked in the profession. The deeper things that a lot of us just gloss over on the day-to-day while we're filling out our spreadsheets or in meetings with coaches. So I think it's a really good reminder of what actually matters in life. Thanks again for listening, and as always, if you enjoyed the podcast, please like, comment, and share it on social media, as well as give it a rating on iTunes. If you have any comments or questions, I look forward to reading those as well, so please, I encourage you to leave questions and start a little discussion, because that's what it's all about. It's starting a discussion and opening the doors so we can all learn a little bit more. Again, I appreciate you joining me, and until next time, this is Juan Perez on the Gamut of Performance podcast.